Hey, I'm Aaron Brandolino from SOURJOE, and today we are making sourdough from start to finish, a full bake. I'm very excited. Let's just jump right into it. Let's go. Let's start from the start with starter. Take your starter out of the fridge the night before you plan on making bread. Move all but 20 grams to the discard jar and top it up with 100 grams of water and 100 grams of flour. So leave your starter out overnight. It should have at least doubled, if not more. This is refeeding or refreshing your starter. If you need a refresher on that, check out our video on making a starter from scratch. Now we're going to take 50 grams of this to make your leaven. Put your starter in the fridge, and to this add 100 grams of water and 100 grams of flour. Now this, you may have noticed, is a 1 to 2 to 2 ratio, and it will hasten the fermentation as well as become incredibly active, which is what we want for our bread making. Mix this up and let it ferment for a couple hours until it more than doubles. At this point, it should pass the float test. Bloop. If it doesn't, just let it continue fermenting until it can pass the test. If it never does, then you're not making sourdough today. Anyway, when it does, you can move on to the ingredients. So we're adding 700 grams of slightly warmer than room temperature water to a bowl. We're ultimately going to use 750, but we're saving 50 for a later use. To this, add your active leaven. Now, this isn't my starter, I just have a lot of these jars and I'm using the wrong prop. Anyway, mix these two together and add 900 grams of bread flour and 100 grams of whole wheat. The little bit of whole wheat adds a little extra flavor and complexity, but you could use all bread flour or all-purpose flour, and I would always just encourage you to go for unbleached. I have made sourdough with the cheapest, most processed flour before, but it always gets better results both in flavor and structure with less processed stuff. So today we're essentially doing the Country White Loaf from Tartine by Chad Robertson. It's an old world French style country loaf. It's a magnificent book. If you don't have it, I highly recommend it. It's a great book to have on any home baker's shelf. Even if you're not baking, actually, the pictures are really nice too. Anyway, once this is a shaggy ball with no dry spots, cover it up with a damp towel and let it sit for about 30 minutes. This is called Autolyse. This gives the flour a head start to fully hydrate, allowing gluten to form and enzymes like amylase to begin breaking down the starches into sugars. Even after a short period of time, you'll notice a difference. The dough will feel a little more cohesive and extensible. Right now, I'm checking just how extensible it is, and it's good, but it will improve with the addition of this key component. Salt! Non-iodized, please. Preferably sea or kosher. 22 grams of this along with that last 50 grams of water. This just aids in the even dispersal of the salt crystals. Now really get in there and mix it all up. It'll feel weird at first, but then you'll notice that the dough will come back together and form an even smoother ball than before. It'll also feel super tight-knit, if that makes any sense. Do this stretching, folding, and rotating thing until it feels supple and cohesive. Should take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. And this is the only sort of kneading we'll do. Now, throw a damp towel over the top and let it rest for 30 to 45 minutes. I would lean towards longer times if you're in a cooler spot. This is the Windowpane test in front of a window in case the metaphor wasn't obvious enough. Now we're in what's called the bulk fermentation phase, which, depending on your ambient temperature, will take between 3 to 4 hours. We'll be doing folds periodically throughout to help strengthen the gluten. I'm doing the technique called stretch and fold, where you pull on one edge of the dough up and fold it over itself, rotate and repeat. I'll show you another technique that I prefer the next times. Cover this with a damp towel and let it sit for 30 to 45 minutes. Alright, now, ooh, look at that. Alright, for our second fold, we are going to release it from the sides and we're going to do what's called a coil fold. So basically, you reach from the middle and pull it up until it's completely separated from the bowl and coil it back down on top of itself. Rotate it and do it all over again. Now, as you do this, you'll notice that it gets a little more taut, and that's exactly what we're going for. One reason I really like this method is because you really get a sense of the feeling of the dough. All these little fermentation, that isn't trapped air, that's actual gas production. Another reason I prefer the coil method is because it's easier to monitor the dough relaxing. Rather than following strict timing like exactly 30 minutes, it's better to fold it once it has properly relaxed. And that could vary depending on a lot of factors. This is all part of getting to know the dough. It could be an hour, it could be 10 minutes. It is a living thing after all. Anyway, 30 to 45 minutes later, a good habit is to always smell the dough at all stages. You'll notice it gets more sour. This is good, but you don't want it to get too sour, otherwise you've over-fermented it and it will lose structural integrity and just become a bowl of mush. During bulk fermentation, we're not actually looking for this thing to grow substantially. You don't want more than maybe like a third of growth. We're just helping it along, letting it do its thing. Cover and let it rest another 30 to 45 minutes. You should notice that your dough has risen actually a little bit, almost by a third, and it'll pull away easy from the walls. That is a very, very good sign. We're well on our way. We're doing one more coil fold and then that'll be it. You don't want to mess with it too much. You really just want to help it along more than anything. That is a lot of gas production in this dough. That's really good. So now we're going to cover it up. I let this one sit for an hour. And now we're on to divide, shaping, and proofing. So sprinkle your work surface lightly with some flour. Now take your dough, release it from the sides, and dump it out onto the table. Boom. Cool. And then you just carefully take the bowl off, and look at that. Can you believe that turns into bread? Anyway, lightly sprinkle the top with some flour. And what you could do, potentially, is to add up all of the weights of the ingredients and then divide it by 2 so you know how much each loaf is supposed to weigh. Or you could just eyeball it like this maverick. Now what I'm doing here is pre-shaping, so I'm getting the dough used to being in the shape that it's going to be until we bake it. You don't need to do too much, you just want to ball it up, but of course, with this one, I do too much because I don't like how it has a vaguely square shape, so I just spend too much time fidgeting and fidgeting and fidgeting and fidgeting and fidgeting. Anyway. Sprinkle the top, so this top layer is going to always be the top layer. This will eventually be your crust. So sprinkle it and let it sit for 20 minutes. Look at that. That's how much the dough relaxes. So, if it absorbed the flour, just sprinkle it with a little bit more flour. You really don't want to do too much flour because you don't want to introduce too much more flour to your dough. You just want to have enough on there so you can handle it, which is why it's great to dust your hands every now and then as well. So now we're on to the shaping phase. Take your ball of dough and flip it over onto the floured side. This side right here, we don't want any flour because we're going to be sticking it to itself. Now, shaping it, I like to stretch it out into a rough square, not too much, just a little bit, so I have a handle on it. And you want to take the bottom third and fold it up. Take the sides, fold it on top of that. And fold the top third down, not any farther past halfway. Now this next part is called stitching. It requires quick movements and confidence. If you don't have that yet, don't worry about it. You can just skip to this part where you roll it up and tuck it onto itself. Generally, you'll always want to use swift, confident motions. The dough can smell your fear, but do what you feel most comfortable with first, because if you try things too out of your wheelhouse and it gets really sticky and you start pulling it in random directions, you're going to lose a lot of structural integrity. So again, I do the same with this one, except I'm going to be shaping it into a boule. The other one will go into a banneton, which is a basket shaped like a long loaf of bread. This one is going to be a boule, which is a circular loaf of bread. So essentially the same thing, bottom third up, sides over, realign, top third down, but of course I pulled it too far, that's okay. The stitching, which is right, left, right, right, left, and then roly-poly. Now, if you just stopped here, you'd have made another Batard for the banneton. But of course, I fidget with it way too much. But this general motion here is what you'd like to do. Roll it forward and pull it back using your fingers as a kind of shovel. So you want it to feel like it's tucking in under itself. Give them a little pat just to let them know that they're doing a great job. And as they sit while you try to figure out where to put your baskets on the bench, the bottom will seal up, and that's exactly what you want. As you can see here, ta-da! No seal. I like to fold it in half and gently put it into the basket. Now, these are proofing baskets, which are great. They're really useful, they're wooden, and they usually come with some kind of fabric lining. But honestly, I've used a colander, a towel-lined colander before. I've used a towel-lined strainer. I've used those little baskets that you get at the restaurant with the bread in them and the napkin in it. I've used things like that. You can use all kinds of stuff. You just generally want to go for something with a little bit of airflow because you don't want too much moisture building up, which will ruin your loaf. Make sure your baskets are liberally dusted. Now instead, I like to fold it into kind of a plus sign rather than just in half. And I do this extra little bit of shaping for boules. Kind of like the stretch and fold, but just really gently so it cinches up on itself. Now, if you want to bake that night, you'll leave these out on the counter for 1 to 2 hours at this ambient temperature, or, which I always prefer, is to cold proof them, which is where you throw them in the fridge. You will get a much more flavorful loaf if you cold proof it. Alright, so bake day. Preheat your oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit with the pots that you plan on baking in them. Once it comes up to temperature, just leave them in there for about a half hour. You really want these guys smoking hot before you put your loaves in. That rapid change from cold to piping hot is really what helps with oven spring. So now I'm starting with the boule. I dusted the bottom and I just checked to make sure that it could separate from the basket before I flipped it onto this parchment paper. What I'm using right here is called a lame. It's spelled lame and pronounced lam. These things are really helpful in scoring because it helps me hold it a little more horizontal to the table, which will just give me more of a dramatic ear, which is when the bread sticks up off of the loaf. Now I'm just doing a square cut on this boule because I really like the outcome of it, but you could do any kind of scoring you like, and you don't need a razor blade. You could use a serrated knife or a very, very sharp knife. Razor blades are probably the best thing because it gives you the cleanest cut. Anyway, just throw a lid onto this pot and throw it in the oven. Remember to be very, very, very careful. These things are 500 degrees Fahrenheit. It could burn the crap out of you. I've got burns all up and down my arms and hands because I've touched the oven, I've touched the pots. It's a learning curve for sure, but just be careful. Anyway, I like this cast iron combo cooker because it's really actually nice to have when you go camping. You could fry some eggs, you can make a soup, you can do whatever, but what's really nice about baking is that you can use this shallow side to just plop the bread directly into it and score it there without ever risking burns to your hand. And you don't need to use this pizza peel, which I put here for no reason apparently. Throw the lid on, be very careful again, and throw it in the oven at 500 degrees. You're going to keep these in the oven for 20 minutes. At the 20-minute mark, take the lids off and turn the oven down to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to bake this for another 20 to 25 minutes. That last little bit is entirely up to you how dark you want the outside to be. The 20 minutes is more of the minimum mark. Alright, there are a couple things you need to do right when it comes out of the oven, during the post-bake. First things first, make sure you're always resting this on a wire rack or something that has a lot of airflow underneath it to keep the crust as crispy and crusty as possible. If you put them on a flat surface, they're going to steam underneath, and that will just really ruin all of the hard work that you put into this. Look at those bad boys. He is obviously very pleased with them. Alright, what I'm doing right now is doing the knock test. Basically, you knock on the bottom and it should sound like a hollow door. If it sounds like you're knocking on your uncle's beer belly, then you should probably keep it in the oven for a little bit longer because it hasn't cooked all the way through and you're going to get a really gummy interior. So another cool thing that I tried to get is the bread song. I didn't really do a good job here, but I tried. Nice try, buddy. When it starts to cool, it actually contracts a little, and the crust starts to crackle. And when you listen to it, it's a symphony of crackle, and it really just, it makes you want to cut into it right away, but you can't. You have to let it sit there for at least an hour, if not until it's completely cool, because remember, it's continuing to cook until it's completely cold. All right, the coup de grace. The moment we've all been waiting for. Oh, look how happy he is. I was so happy with the result that I obviously wasn't thinking about framing. I have no idea how to hold this thing. I was just so happy. Well, that's it. Start to finish. I hope this helps, and good luck! Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like and subscribe for more upcoming videos, and head on over to SOURJOE.com to see what we're all about. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter. It's got a lot of great info, updates, and special offers. You can follow us on any social media at SOURJOE Official. I hope to see you there. And in the meantime, I'm Aaron. Happy baking.